President Lee Jae-myung has pledged full government support for Samsung's latest HBM investment, saying it will strengthen the Chungcheongdo region's role as a key high-tech hub and drive Korea's next industrial leap. Korea's consumer inflation climbed to a 30-month high in June as soaring oil prices driven by Middle East tensions pushed up the cost of living. The death toll from Venezuela's devastating twin earthquakes has climbed past 2,000 as the government declares a week of national mourning amid mounting casualties and an ongoing search for survivors. After rolling out massive AI and chip investment plans earlier this week, President Lee Jae-myung headed to the Central region today to champion new regional investment projects and a high-tech future. Our Yoon Jung-min starts us off.
Speaking in the central Chungcheongdo province region on Thursday as a follow-up to the mega projects announcement earlier this week, President Lee Jae-myung defined 4 technologies: chips, displays, secondary batteries, and biotechnology as core national strategic industries that will determine the future of Korea.
그리고 이러한 4대 첨단 산업이 하나의 권역 안에 모여서 강력한 생태계를 이루고 있는 지역이 바로 이곳 충청입니다. 특히 삼성의 결정에 따라 이루어진 HBM 생산을 통해서 첨단 산업 중심지로서 충청의 위상은 더욱 강화될 것입니다.
During Thursday's announcement of regional investment plans, companies committed a combined 392 trillion won, about $253 billion in investments. Samsung will invest in next-generation displays and HBM fabs, SK in NAND flash, and Celltrion in biopharmaceuticals.
We are at a pivotal moment as the global economic landscape undergoes profound change. Samsung will devote its full strength to helping our nation make a great leap forward as a global leader in next-generation industries.
Hailing the decision as a path leading to a leap forward in the country's high-tech industry, the president and his cabinet promised full support, such as financing, tax incentives, and deregulation.
We plan to create special subsidies for new growth engines worth hundreds of billions of won every year and significantly ease a number of complex regulations.
On Thursday, President Lee once again refuted criticism from the opposition, which has raised the issue of discrimination against other regions over the selection of the investment sites, saying that the projects should not be approached in a divisive manner.
이게 선물 나눠주는 게 아닙니다. 여기 한 개, 여기 한 개, 뭐 이렇게 하면 기업 운영을 할 수가 없어요. 그런데 이거 왜 나눠주지 않냐 이렇게 접근하면 안 되죠.
He added that it's the role of the government to support private firms so that they can choose sites they see as appropriate for investment. Lee once again noted that there was neither coercion nor pressure in seeking corporate investment, calling the accusation by the opposition outdated. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Prime Minister Han Sung-suk says all government ministries will adopt AI-powered work systems within the year. Speaking at her inauguration ceremony at the government complex in Sejong on Thursday, Han called for innovation to boost work efficiency and denouncing outdated workplace practices. She added that AI will help the government develop more tailored policies while making administrative services more efficient for the public. Consumer prices in Korea climbed to a 30-month high, with headline inflation remaining above the 3% mark for a second straight month. Our Baek Joo-hee reports.
Korea's consumer prices rose at the fastest pace in 2.5 years in June, according to the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Thursday. The consumer price index rose 3.2% year-on-year last month, marking the largest growth since December 2023. Headline inflation has now stayed above the 3% mark since a 3.1% gain was recorded in May. The sharp acceleration was predominantly fueled by petroleum products due to soaring global oil prices caused by ongoing geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. The price of petroleum products spiked 24.7% from a year earlier, the largest increase since July 2022. The price of gasoline and diesel jumped 23.1% and 33.7% respectively, driving up overall industry product prices by 4.4%. As our international crude prices have started to drop, domestic petroleum costs are also going down gradually. However, it may take a couple of weeks for the consumers to fully experience the change.
To be honest, I can't really feel it yet. I remember prices going up a lot, but I don't think I felt the drop too much yet. I think I'll start to feel the difference if it goes down to around 1,500 won.
However, the rally could have been steeper if not for state intervention. According to the Ministry of Finance and Economy, a government-imposed price ceiling on petroleum products, implemented since mid-March, shaved approximately 0.4 percentage points off the June inflation rate. Without this cap, the consumer price growth would have peaked at 3.6% last month.
Domestic petroleum prices are expected to decrease this month in tandem with the reduction in the price ceiling. Consequently, unless there are major fluctuations in other sectors, we anticipate a decline in the overall consumer price index as well.
The government expects inflationary pressures to ease starting this month, factoring in recent drops in international oil prices and subsequent adjustment to the domestic price cap. Moving into the second half of the year, the government aims to cap inflation below the 3% range by deploying an economic stabilization package worth 1 trillion won, or approximately $643 million. Prime Minister Han Sung-suk emphasized on Thursday that the top priority must be placed on managing consumer prices to ease the burden on the public amid the prolonged conflict in the Middle East. Baekju-hee, Arirang News.
South Korean stocks tumbled on Thursday as fears of a semiconductor supply glut rattled investor sentiment. Kim Do-yeon has the market wrap.
Korea's benchmark KOSPI plunged 7.89% on Thursday, closing at 7,648.09. The sharp drop led a massive downturn across Korean stock markets, with the tech-heavy KOSDAQ also falling 6.74% to finish at 866.72. The extreme volatility triggered sell-side sidecars on both bourses, temporarily halting program trading for 5 minutes, with KOSPI coming just 7 minutes since opening bell. For the KOSPI, it marked the 30th sidecar activation so far this year, underscoring the intense fluctuations gripping the market. Market heavyweights Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, which together account for more than half of the KOSPI's total market capitalization, also tumbled sharply. Samsung Electronics dropped 9.06% to close at 286,000 won, while SK Hynix plunged 14.57% to finish at 2,187,000 won. The sharp downturn comes as foreign capital continues to flow out of the domestic market. According to investor trading data, foreign investors have accelerated their selling in recent months, recording cumulative net selling of around 980 billion won, or about $633 million over the past 3 months. The immediate sell-off was driven largely by reports that Meta plans to launch Meta Compute, a cloud service built around surplus AI data center infrastructure. The news fueled concerns over a potential supply glut in the AI chip market, sending U.S. chip maker Micron Technology tumbling 10.6% overnight.
The combination of Meta's latest announcement, Oracle's recent structural warnings, and OpenAI's newly unveiled software that significantly lowers GPU demand has generated collective anxiety that the semiconductor sector could peak much sooner than previously anticipated.
Despite the sharp decline, market analysts say the correction is largely the result of profit-taking after a strong second quarter rally rather than a sign of weakening industry fundamentals. Investors are now watching a series of upcoming events, beginning with Samsung Electronics' preliminary second quarter earnings announcement on July 7th. Meanwhile, the local currency weakened slightly against the greenback, with the $1 exchange rate closing at 1,555.8 won per US dollar. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In Venezuela, authorities have announced 7 days of national mourning as the death toll continues to rise, with the latest tally showing well above over 2,000 losses of lives. Oh Soo-young has more.
Rescue efforts continue across Venezuela for missing people trapped beneath collapsed buildings. Over a week has passed since a series of powerful earthquakes struck the country, but families of the missing remain at the disaster sites, holding on to hope that their loved ones may still be found.
I have a missing cousin. Her name is Freydalyn Subero. We are still searching for her. She was in the OPP 27 building complex, and from there, we don't know anything more. She was with her partner, but we have tried to search for them everywhere, in hospitals, on lists.
As of Wednesday local time, the official death toll had climbed to 2,295. The number of injured has also reached 12,267. The Venezuelan government has declared a 7-day period of national mourning in honor of those who have lost their lives. Acting Venezuelan President Delcy Rodriguez wrote on social media that Venezuela's soul is being torn apart by the pain of the lives lost in the earthquake. Some 59,000 buildings were damaged or destroyed by the twin earthquakes, which hit seconds apart with magnitudes of 7.2 and 7.5, according to Oregon State University researchers using satellite images. The International Rescue Committee said disruptions to water and electricity supplies are making it difficult to secure safe drinking water and maintain proper sanitation. The United Nations World Food Programme appealed for $50 million in funding to provide emergency food assistance to as many as 5,000 people over the next 3 months.
Recovery will be a marathon, not a sprint. Sustained support for the people of Venezuela is critical, and it's exactly what we're doing.
The World Health Organization also warned that Venezuela's healthcare facilities have exceeded their capacity, raising the risk of a major outbreak of infectious diseases. Young, Arirang News.
Korean tech titans Samsung and SK Group has sent shockwaves through the industry with massive investment plans. Together, they're pledging over $3 trillion, showcasing their ambitious plans to redraw Korea's industrial map. For a closer look at their decisions, our business correspondent Park Junan joins us in the studio. Welcome back, Junan.
Yes, good evening, Dami. It's great to be back in the studio.
So, Junan, roughly $3 trillion is hard to even imagine. Walk us through the sheer scale of the investment first.
Right, Dami. So it is the largest single industrial investment plan in Korea's tech history. The number 4,755 trillion won is equivalent to about 6.5 years worth of Korea's 2026 national budget. Just to clarify, the $3 trillion plan includes investments already committed to projects such as the Semiconductor mega cluster in Gyeonggi-do province, which has been underway for several years. Excluding those existing commitments, the new investment, as per the industry ministry, comes to around 1.46 quadrillion won, or roughly $940 billion. Samsung plans to inject 2,655 trillion won into the country by 2040. SK Group will invest 2,100 trillion won to build AI data centers and on the AI memory production belt. What makes this mega project stand out is its shift away from the Seoul metropolitan area. For decades, the heart of Korea's semiconductor power has been concentrated right around the capital region. But these regions are facing a critical bottleneck. They are rapidly reaching their limits in securing stable electricity and ample water supplies, both of which are essential for semiconductor manufacturing. That's why the two groups are pouring 825 trillion won into Korea's southwest region, specifically targeting cities like Gwangju to establish a second semiconductor mega cluster. Samsung will build a brand new fabrication plant there, marking its first ever core chip production line outside the capital area, while SK hynix will also set up a major production base right alongside it.
You know, now looking at the technology itself, your earlier report heavily focused on Samsung and SK's capacity to produce world-class memory chips. Now, how do these chips fit into, this multi-billion-dollar investment blueprint?
Right, Tammy. So Samsung and SK hynix are the world's two leading memory chip makers, producing advanced memory semiconductors such as HBM, DRAM, and NAND flash. Many mega-cap tech companies, including NVIDIA, Google, Apple, and Amazon, are lining up to secure advanced memory chips produced by Samsung and SK hynix. Here's NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang during his visit to Korea last month, explaining why even doubling memory production would still not be enough to meet AI demand.
I don't think that's enough. But we have to be smart. NVIDIA will use all the memory that SK can produce for us as smartly as we can. So Vera Rubin is built with technology from Korea. Memory technology, incredible memory technology, unheard of amazing memory technology here from Korea.
As global leaders in memory chips, much of Samsung and SK hynix investment will go toward building semiconductor clusters and AI data centers, where they have a global edge. This capital also secures their leadership in the upcoming era of fourth-generation physical AI, where artificial intelligence moves into the real world through advanced robotics and autonomous vehicles.
Now, you mentioned these new fabs will be built outside the Seoul metropolitan area. They'll be located in the regional areas as their new base. Now, what kind of ripple effects can we expect on the South Korean economy?
Right, Tamito. Strategic reason basically comes down to resources and physical limits. By moving to regions like the Southwest, these tech giants hope to secure a long-term supply of these vital utilities to keep their factories running without interruption. However, viewers may have to keep in mind that the blueprint is still in its very early stages with major hurdles ahead, including securing exact factory sites, checking ground stability, and solving potential water supply issues before anything is set in stone. If construction proceeds as planned, the new factories are expected to generate significant economic benefits for local communities. When a major semiconductor plant moves in, it never comes alone. It brings a huge ecosystem of equipment suppliers, material manufacturers, and research centers along with it. This naturally leads to the creation of thousands of high-paying quality jobs. It gives young, talented engineers a solid reason to stay in their hometowns instead of migrating to the capital, which has been a chronic social issue here in Korea. Ultimately, this investment is not just about building factories. It is about building sustainable regional tech hubs that can revitalize local communities and bring much-needed balance to the nation's industrial landscape.
So sustainability will be a key word for that. Chunan, thank you for coming in tonight.
Always a pleasure, Dami.
The U.S. and Iran have wrapped up another round of indirect technical talks in Qatar, but there appears to have been little tangible progress toward keeping their ceasefire agreement on track. Kim Bo-kyung has more.
U.S. and Iranian negotiators, along with mediators, held technical talks in Doha, Qatar, on measures aimed at ending the conflict, but little progress was made. Iran's state-run IRNA news agency reported Wednesday that the Iranian working-level delegation led by Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi had wrapped up meetings with mediators on implementing a memorandum of understanding between Washington and Tehran. Iran reportedly raised several concerns during the talks with mediators, including what it called U.S. failures to meet obligations under the MOU on ending the conflict in Lebanon. Tehran also cited the U.S. military buildup and the deployment of additional personnel in West Asia. Iran said it would establish a communication channel with the U.S. by July 2nd to report possible violations of the MOU. Garibabadi said the talks also covered $6 billion in frozen Iranian assets, adding that essential goods would be purchased and delivered to Iran based on the country's needs. The U.S. delegation, led by President Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was also in Qatar for separate meetings with Qatari officials. However, they did not participate directly in the mediator-led discussions. Instead, working-level officials exchanged views from separate rooms through Qatari and Pakistani mediation. Asked about the technical talks in Doha, Qatar, U.S. President Donald Trump said the meetings had gone well and that the U.S. and Iran were getting along well.
Denuclearization of Iran is moving along well. They've had very good meetings, and we'll see.
Qatar said the latest round of indirect talks ended with positive progress and that both sides had agreed to resume discussions after the July 4th to 9th funeral ceremonies for former Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
A new report from the U.S.-based Center for Strategic and International Studies says combined Russian and Ukrainian military casualties have surpassed 2 million since Russia's invasion of Ukraine 4 years ago. Cha Yoon-kyung has this report.
Military casualties from both Russia and Ukraine have topped 2 million since Russia's invasion of Ukraine 4 years ago, according to a U.S. think tank. The Center for Strategic and International Studies reported Wednesday local time that around 450,000 Russian troops have been killed, with total Russian casualties, including those killed, wounded, or missing, reaching 1.4 million. CSIS estimated that between 125,000 and 150,000 Ukrainian troops have been killed out of a total of between 525,000 and 625,000 Ukrainian casualties. The think tank added that while Russia has suffered the greater overall human cost, Ukraine has seen a higher fatality rate relative to its total number of casualties. Ukraine has also stepped up its use of drones and missiles, bringing the war deeper into Russian territory. In June, Ukrainian drones struck Moscow in some of the largest air attacks on the city since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, setting an oil facility on fire. The reports that Russia is going through its darkest moments since the full-scale invasion began in February 2022. It added that ordinary Russians are increasingly feeling the effects of the war, from a stagnant economy and the return of soldiers' bodies from the front lines to growing drone attacks on Russian territory. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
Now on the K-pop front, BTS and SSERAFIM will perform at this year's iHeartRadio Music Festival in the United States. The festival will take place from September 18th to the 19th at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Now BTS will be on stage on day one, while SSERAFIM will perform on the second day and mark the first time for a K-pop girl group to appear at the annual music event. And American artists such as Cardi B and Snoop Dogg will also be on the lineup this year. Hanwha Ocean has officially been named the preferred bidder for South Korea's next-generation Navy destroyer project, a deal worth 7.8 trillion won, or more than $5 billion US. Now, that is according to Hanwha Ocean, which said the state-run Defense Acquisition Program Administration notified the company of the result on Wednesday. The program aims to build 6 homegrown 7,000-ton Aegis destroyers for the South Korean Navy. Hanwha Ocean has been competing for the project against its rival, HD Hyundai Heavy Industries. The agency plans to begin negotiations with Hanwha Ocean in mid-July and sign the final contract by the end of next month. Now, after the detailed design phase is completed, the lead ship is expected to be delivered to the Navy by the end of 2032.
You might be wondering when and where the next round of monsoon rain will arrive. Well, the seasonal rain front has temporarily shifted south over the sea, giving a brief monsoon break. But it won't last long. The front will move north again tomorrow, bringing rain to Jeju Island by the afternoon. Then on Monday, the rain front is expected to push farther north, bringing this summer's first monsoon rain to the capital region. Tomorrow, we'll see another round of showers across the central regions and parts of northern Gyeongsang-Bukdo province. Rainfall amounts will range from 5 to 40 millimeters, depending on where you are. For the time being, it feels like highs will reach around 31 degrees Celsius in many inland areas tomorrow, making it feel hot and muggy. Tomorrow, most areas will start the day at around 20 degrees. Seoul 21, Chuncheon 19, Busan 20 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 30 degrees, Daegu 30, Gwangju 28 degrees. Looking ahead, daytime highs will continue to hover around 30 degrees. But once the rain arrives on Monday, the heat will ease for a while. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That's all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
해금은 두 줄로 된 한 악기인데 저도 처음에 시작하게 된 거는 그 두 줄에서 너무 다양한 소리가 나오는 게 너무 신기했고 일단 해금이 되게 사람의 목소리랑 좀 비슷하다고 많이들 하세요. 줄을 눌러서 이렇게 음을 계속 왔다 갔다 진동하는 그런 형태를 띠고 있다 보니까 애절하다라고 많이 말씀을 해주시는 것 같아요. 이 곡은 제가 좀 오래 좋아했던 친구에 대한 제 여러 감정을 담은 곡인데요. 슬펐던 마음 혹은 뭐 고마웠던 마음 이런 여러 가지 감정들을 한데 묶어서 마음이 담긴 곡이라고 할 수 있습니다. 현대적인 음악으로 이제 재구성하는 단계를 거칠 때 항상 중요하게 생각하는 거는 음악의 분위기를 해치지 않는 선에서는 뭔가 전통적인 주법들, 식임새 이런 전통의 냄새라고 할까요? 맛? 이런 걸 살릴 수 있는 요소들을 좀 집어넣으려고 하는 편이에요. 저는 요새 연주하면서도 스스로가 마음도 편하고 몸도 편안한 음악들을 좀 자주 들려드리고 싶다. 제가 음악으로 위로받았던 것처럼 제가 하는 음악들로 여러분들이 좀 위로받을 수 있는 순간이 있었으면 좋겠다. 그런 무대를 만들려고 노력해야겠다라는 생각을 했던 것 같습니다.
When did it all begin? The beginning of joy embedded in daily life, where steps of learning meet a bigger world, and history coexists. The legend continues. Innovative technologies come together to unfold a new future, building a better tomorrow. A joy accessible to all, always present in your daily life. JDC.
Knock knock! The magical door to the world of K-animation is swinging wide open. Meet your instant new BFF, the adorable Catch. Tina Ping will have you hooked from the very first glance. Need a hand? Our Robocar Pony Rescue team is always zooming in to save the day. How about tagging along on Pink Fong and Pal's super exciting quest to reclaim their lost magic? With the mysterious life forms Cabion by your side, you can become a Cabion master and save humanity like a total hero. Protecting children's innocence while igniting their boundless imaginations. That's the magic of Korean animation. K-Animation, the ultimate bestie for kids worldwide.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. South Korea is facing a series of difficult questions about how its social policies should evolve in a rapidly changing society. Seoul is now considering raising the eligibility age for free subway rides from 65 to 70 for the first time in more than 4 decades, reigniting a broader debate over what it really means to be an older adult in today's Korea. Now, at the same time, negotiations over next year's minimum wage have once again missed the legal deadline as labor and business remain far apart over how to balance rising living costs with mounting pressure on employers. So what do these debates tell us about the future welfare, work, and fairness across generations? For answers to this, we connect to Shin Eun-kyung, Associate Professor of Sociology at Korea University, who's also a visiting scholar at Harvard University. A very big welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
And also joining us is Lee Hyun, Dean and Professor of Law at Handong International Law School. Good to see you again, Professor.
It's great to be back on the program.
So let's start a discussion right away. First with Professor Shin. Of course, like I've said, Seoul is considering raising the age for free subway rides from 65 to 70. Why has this issue come to the forefront right now?
I mean, the free ride program for the elderly has been financially bleeding for years, but the number just shockingly increased. Losses hit a record of $775 billion in 2025, and the share of the total deficit attributable to the free rides increased from 24% to 58% just in 4 years. Especially when we consider rapidly aging Seoul population, it also complicates the situation. In 2021, 16% of Seoul population was over 65. In 2025, we hit 20%, which means we can only expect more and more people become eligible for the benefit. That means ever heavier fiscal burden on the Seoul metropolitan government is inevitable. Also, from the citizens' perspective, reaction is somewhat split. Many seniors see it as a state taking away hard-earned social rights unfairly. For the younger generation, by contrast, the question why they should finance an ever-growing benefit they won't enjoy for decades, if at all. Also, political and policy debates emerged as well. The critics also note that age hike may be wrongful. Limiting the free rides to the bottom 70% by income would cut losses far more effectively. So some see the proposal as politically convenient measure rather than a genuine proposition for the fairness. So the tension is actually very clear. The government sees unsustainable structural cost. Citizens sees a contested question of who deserves the benefit and who should pay for it.
Right, so it's this debate. It's going well beyond transportation and reflects a broader demographic changes and differences in generations' perspectives as well. Now, so as this discussion moves forward, some argue that local governments have the legal authority to adjust the eligibility age, even if the national standard remains at 65. Professor Lee, from a legal perspective, how feasible is Seoul's proposal?
Right. So there's actually no specific law that sets a target, age for free subway rides. So as a result, there's no legal framework necessarily to say that you have to offer or not offer free rides for senior citizens or those who are elderly. So as a result, in terms of the law itself, really, it gives the local operators generally free rein to decide for themselves as to what the cost of ridership should be for the subway. But as we all know, though, when it comes to this proposal from Seoul, beyond just a legal issue, which really there's no legal issue there really, the real question becomes sort of network operability. Because if anyone has taken the subway in the capital region, everyone knows that basically you can take a subway from Gyeonggi province to Seoul and then Seoul to Incheon. And in fact, even though for the rider himself or herself, it's very seamless, but we actually have different operators who basically can set their own fares for those lines. So for instance, we're talking about the Seoul Metro area, that's governed by, basically by the Seoul Metro, the Metropolitan Authority. But when it comes to, let's say, the Gyeonggi lines outside of Seoul, those are mainly run by Korail. And then you have even private operators operating the Shinbundang line, right? So as a result, while Seoul City can mandate a particular fare or no fare for, let's say, elderly, when it comes to then dealing with issues of how you would then collect fares if the other operators decide not to honor that or have different rates, that will cause some sort of issues with respect to how you collect fares for those different operators, because it's so seamless in terms of the rider's point of view. So in terms of legal perspective, there's really no barrier, but it really becomes a question about how the operators themselves will then manage this issue together.
Right, so it's not as just simple, so many operators could have different opinions on that as well. Now, one of the biggest concerns about the latest move is the impact on people, of course, between the ages of 65 and 69 who could lose public transport benefits. Professor Shin, how significant do you think that backlash could be, and what kind of concerns are likely to emerge?
Actually, this is a very well-studied policy question, most importantly, the health outcome. The mobility has a significant consequence for health, especially for the elderly. The mobility barriers translate directly into reduced social and physical activity, which will lead to public health concern later on. So when trends become costly again, seniors make fewer trips and cut off social visits, community activities, and non-urgent medical care, which is directly tied to well-being and health. This can accelerate social isolation, depression, and physical decline for the elders. And also, age is a blunt measure, raising the threshold to hit a low-income, young, old hardest. Since the wealthier seniors can afford the fare while the poor people have to cut off their travel. For many seniors, discounted transportation is not a perk. It is a critical lifeline. It allows older adults to see their doctors, take a prescription, visit family, and stay connected to their communities instead of being isolated at home. When we lower the cost of getting around for the senior, we are not just helping one specific age group. We're investing in a society that values social connection and inclusion. So a blunt age hike may save money on paper, but creates bigger social and health costs down the line. Because of that, we may need to think targeted fixes, for example, like gradual phase-in, age tiers, income-based support, off-peak limit, and gradual discount instead of free or paid binary schemes.
But another concern about this issue is the eligibility age. If it's raised while the retirement age remains lower, Professor Lee, many could face a gap between leaving work and receiving benefits. What kind of safeguards would be needed to avoid creating such a gap?
Right, exactly. There will be a gap, and the problem is that Korea's statutory, retirement age now is 60. There's, of course, talks, and it will be raised higher, but the national pension eligibility age is currently 63 and then scheduled to rise eventually to 65 later on. And so now, because of this, as you mentioned, a gap, we have a problem because someone retires at 60, but then there's a 3-year gap or some year gap before they can actually receive their pension. And so the question then becomes, what happens to those people who need a salary but are unable to access it because their pension doesn't kick in until a later date? So that's a real issue. And the question, as you mentioned, with respect to safeguards, safeguards, there has to be safeguards in place to cover those years that someone does not earn an income. And so there's been talk about various kinds of ways of dealing with this. And so one natural way is just to synchronize the dates of retirements and the pension eligibility date in terms of the age. But not just that, you can certainly do that. But another issue is if you're not willing to, let's say, adjust the retirement age, then the question then becomes, are there going to be any requirements for employers to potentially, let's say, re-employ people who are subject to retirement? And then if that happens, then there's lots of other concerns there as well, because usually someone who retires is at the highest level of income with respect to salaries, with respect to, let's say, a company or business. If you're at a senior level. So if you get rehired, the question is, are you going to be rehired at the highest level of salary that you could be earning? Or does there need to be some adjustments with respect to, let's say, your age, and then also considering younger employees who are coming into the system, right? So there's a lot of questions here in terms of how to deal with this issue, because if you're going to require people to be reemployed after they retire to cover this gap, right? There are lots of sort of downward issues down the road that you have to deal with respect to new workers, younger workers coming in, and how this is going to affect the company's bottom line, who's responsible for this in terms of salaries so that there is no gap. Does the government need to step in with some sort of government program? So this is a really important issue because the safeguards need to be there in order to help people who are not going to have a salary for that time period before their pension actually kicks in.
Definitely. So this would suggest that any reform would be needed to be accompanied by broader policy changes on different sectors. Now, finally, so if Seoul actually moves ahead with this proposal, Professor Shin, do you think it could become a turning point for raising the age standard nationwide? And what would it take to build public consensus?
Most plausibly, yes. I mean, the subway benefit can be seen as uniquely a Seoul problem, but the subway debate is really a proxy for a much larger question that Korea is facing at the moment, whether to raise the age line of elderly itself. Currently, we are using 65 as a cutoff, but as a famous meme said, 70 is a new 50. As with the growing life expectancy, being 65 carries very different meaning now. When we first implemented this free ride program, 68.4. Now in 2026, we have 83.5 years of life expectancy on average, 83.5. Certainly 65 has become somewhat questionable cutoff for the elderly. But we need to be very careful, as Professor Lee mentioned, because this change will cascade into pensions, healthcare, long-term care, and other social benefits. So it's a very important moment for think about the seniority, hopefully driven not by fiscal panic, but by fairness. And yes, of course, public consensus matter on this issue, as in general, consensus is less about the actual number than about perceived fairness of the process. So I think Seoul can be set a very good example, but only it models a procedure that our citizens can trust and agree on.
We'll have to see how discussions would unfold in the moving forward. Now, let's shift to another topic. So this year's minimum wage, Professor Shin, negotiations have once again missed the legal deadline with labor and business still apart. Beyond the numbers, what does this disagreement tell us about the challenges facing Korea's economy?
So obviously, the missed deadline is less of a technical failure than a clear symptom of a broader social insecurity. 3 points in particular are worth thinking through here. First of all, the current minimum wage deadlock in Korea reveals profound discrepancy in how different social classes experience the economy. For low-wage workers who are navigating through temporary and part-time jobs, the issue is directly related to survival and a basic claim to living wage as a social right. For many small business owners, at the same time, the same wage debate is experienced as an existential threat. So each side actually claimed the victimhood and mostly plausible. And secondly, there is a certain irony in why we can't seem to reach an agreement on the minimum wage It shows just how fixated we've become on the number itself. As it stands, Korean minimum wage system doesn't account for differences across regions, across industries, or across skill levels. So in a way, this deadlock is also a chance to see the underlying major problem, that we are clinging for far too rigidly to a system that simply doesn't reflect the diversity of the 21st century labor market. Overfixation on a single national number that ignores regional, sectoral, and skill differences will not solve the problem. Also, most importantly, the gap between law and reality is so wide. In Korea, about 12.5% of all wage workers are paid below the minimum wage. What's the point of agreeing on a certain number that cannot be implemented? When we look at how the minimum wage actually is implemented in practice, we can see how unrealistic the magic one number approach is. In large companies with 300 or more employees, that rate is just 2.5. But at the smallest business, those with fewer than 5 workers, it climbs up to 30 to 40%. So the violations of the minimum wage law are turning up to strikingly high in small places. And the truth is, even if everyone agrees on a minimum wage, as long as the number doesn't reflect the reality of the economy on the ground, the underlying economic inequality will simply going to persist.
So just beyond just fixation of these numbers, implementation is another question that needs to be resolved. Now, going back to the discussion that we have, Professor Lee, labor groups are calling for a 16% increase while employers are demanding a wage freeze legally and institutionally. How is the Minimum Wage Commission expected to bridge this wide gap?
Well, let's think about the commission itself. We're talking about 27 members. 9 members represent workers, the other 9 sort of management or employers, and then you have 9 that are sort of public interest members, and they're supposed to be neutral, right? They're appointed by the government. And so this commission is supposed to deliberate and then sort of make a recommendation to the minister, who will then make an announcement as to what the minimum wage should be. Now, basically the way it works in the commission is naturally you have the employer side and the employee side. Each side will make their sort of proposal. And as you noted here, the employee side, they want a 16% increase to raise the minimum wage to 12,000 won, whereas employers want to freeze it and keep it as it is. So basically you have both sides, and then of course you have those 9 members who are the public interest members who are appointed by the government, and they sort of hold the tiebreaker vote, right, in this whole process. So generally speaking, they're trying to reach some consensus, essentially. They go through many rounds of discussions, and last year, there was eventually a settlement among the commission members to agree on a particular minimum wage. But as it stands, in terms of where the parties are now, right? We have one calling for 16% increase and another side, the employers, saying 0%. The question is, where will they fall in between, right? And part of it is as opposed to a deliberative process, it more looks like a negotiation at some point, where the government then steps in to sort of reflect the views of the government, and then that process is worked out where then an actual minimum wage is set. So this is supposed to be generally a deliberative process, but I think we all can see that this is a negotiated sort of rate. And so depending on whether each side and how strongly each side comes forward, and whether or not there can be consensus reached, that will really be the basis by which the decision is actually made with respect to the commission. And then hopefully at some point right in August, it should be announced in terms of what the rate actually is.
So reaching common ground certainly won't be as easy as it sounds. But stepping a little bit back, Professor Lee, the minimum wage has missed the legal deadline in most years since the system has been introduced. Do you think there should be some reform regarding that?
Yeah, because this has been a 40-year sort of decision structure that's been in place, where we have this commission, and again, it generally was thought of as being a deliberative process because we have a commission. A commission is supposed to gather together, hear various reports, and then come to sort of general consensus to make a decision as to what the minimum wage should be. But it's really not a work of a commission. It's more like a negotiation. And so as a result, because you have interested parties on both the employer side and on the employee side, basically, this haggling process is what we've been seeing over the years when it comes to minimum wage. And so as a result, that's one issue that I think needs to be addressed. Is this is not really a commission, but really a negotiation. But then there's also another question about the government-appointed commissioners or the members of the commission, the public interest members, in terms of whether they're that neutral, because of course they're appointed by the government and the president. So obviously they're going to reflect potentially the views of the ruling party or the president who's in power. And so as a result, there's that element as well with respect to the work of the commission. And then, with respect to reforming the whole process, then the question becomes, where people have missed the deadline, right? As we talked about, they missed the deadline to sort of announce and get to some result with respect to deciding on the rate. Basically, these deadlines, do they have any real significance? They certainly do at one level in terms of pushing the commission to make a decision. But because it seemed to be, regularly missed, that seems to be some concern for dysfunction. And as a result, the question is there needs to be, people have called for some real change in the system to redesign the whole system in such a way that we have a more deliberative process, more fairness, more voices in the conversation, that the commission can do its work, and this wouldn't be simply a negotiation between sort of management and labor. So I think that's where a lot of the conversation has been heading so far.
Right. So it really raises an important question about whether the current system is still fit for purpose, and we'll have to see how this would evolve moving forward. But as for now, we'll have to leave our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Professor Lee.
It was my pleasure.
And of course, Professor Shin, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.